right, my friends, we have finished learning about the ancient Indian and Chinese civilizations. We have talked a lot about different components of ancient civilizations and where we saw them in our ancient Indian and Chinese civilizations. Some of those components, the ones we've been talking about, are cities. We talked about Mohenjo-Daro in ancient India and this city in ancient China that have walls and buildings where people live and work. We've talked about jobs. We've talked a lot about farming. Dates were a common crop in ancient India, and farming was important both in ancient India and in China because farming let people eat. People can't have food without farming or cloth for their clothing. We talked about different leaders in both of those ancient civilizations. One leader that we talked about was Asoka, who helped spread Buddhism throughout all of Asia and did a lot of kind and good things for the people of Asia. We also talked about China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, who ordered the Great Wall to be built. We talked a lot about writing. We talked about how in lots of ancient civilizations, the type of writing that they used is no longer used today. But Chinese writing that was formed thousands of years ago in ancient China is still used today. And we talked about religion. We talked about two religions. Both of these were started in ancient India. The first religion we talked about was Hinduism, where they believe in multiple gods and goddesses. And we talked about Buddhism, which was started by a man called the Buddha. In our next domain, so for our next few weeks, we will be learning about another ancient civilization. This ancient civilization is not in Asia like China and India are. This civilization is somewhere else in the world. I'm going to go pull up a map so I can show you where we're going and where we're going to be learning about for the next little while. The civilization that we will hear about today developed after the ancient Chinese civilization and is still remembered today for the way its people thought and lived. This civilization developed in an area of the world across the Atlantic Ocean on the continent Europe. We can see the location of this civilization on our map in red. We will be talking about Greece. Greece is shown in Europe, in the continent Europe, in red on our map. Long, long ago, a large group of people lived together in this area in a well-organized way as a civilization. Contributions. Contributions are helpful or important things or ideas that are shared and or passed down through time. Some of the important contributions from ancient China that we learned about were seed drills and the Chinese writing system. Boundaries. Boundaries are edges or real or imaginary lines that form a border. For example, our mom warned us that if we left the boundaries of the yard, we would not be allowed to play outside anymore. Rugged. If something is rugged, that means that it is rough or uneven. For example, Jim was exhausted after hiking up the rugged mountain trail. Unique. Unique means special or the only one of its kind. For example, my aunt has a unique collection of coins. Independently. If you do something independently, that means that you do it on your own without the influence or help of someone or something else. A mother bird will feed her baby birds until they are big enough to feed themselves independently. Think of something that you can do independently. What's something that you know how to do independently? The antonym or opposite of the word independently is dependently. The prefix in often makes a word have an opposite meaning, just like the prefix un. What do you think dependently means? Right, dependently is an antonym of independently. So if independently means that you can do something without help, dependently means that you are relying on someone or something else for what you need. For example, pets live dependently on their owners, but wild animals survive independently without the help of humans. There are other words that have in at the beginning, and if you remove the in, you make the antonym of that word. Let's go over a couple of examples. The antonym of the word visible is invisible. Invisible means that you cannot see something, and visible means that you can see it. The antonym of the word correct is incorrect. And the antonym of the word active is inactive. About 2,800 years ago, there lived a civilization of people called the ancient Greeks. Today, part of the area where this ancient civilization lived is called Greece. Long ago, however, the ancient Greeks lived on a much larger area of land. The boundaries of ancient Greece spread widely to the east and west, into many areas bordering on the Black Sea to the north, and across hundreds of islands in the Mediterranean and Aegean seas. Expeditions, or journeys, by land and by ship, allowed the ancient Greeks to travel as far west as present-day Britain, and as far east as India. The ancient Greeks traveled to explore far-off lands, and also to trade or buy and sell goods with people from other areas. The ancient Greeks were similar to other ancient civilizations in some ways. They had writing systems, leaders and laws, religions, and different people to do different jobs. And all of these ancient civilizations, the Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Indians, Chinese, Maya, Inca, Aztec, and Greeks, discovered ways to design and build magnificent structures, or buildings, that can still be seen today. You will see pictures of some of these structures in another lesson. The ancient Greeks, however, were also different from other ancient civilizations in many important ways. Unlike the Egyptians and Mesopotamians, the Greeks did not develop around a great river like the Nile in Egypt or the Tigris and Euphrates near Babylon. Greek land was not as fertile as the land near those wide, flooding rivers. Greece is a land of high, rugged, rocky mountains, and in many parts, farming for the ancient Greeks was a struggle. It is very difficult to farm on mountains and rugged land. You are going to hear about one type of hardy or strong tree, however, that the ancient Greeks were able to grow in abundance, or in great amounts. In addition to being farmers, some Greeks were also shepherds who took care of sheep on this rugged land. Some Greeks built harbors near the Black, Aegean, and Mediterranean seas, and many became expert sailors and fishermen, using boats like the one in this image. Harbors are sheltered places on the water where ships can safely load and unload their cargo or goods. The largest island in the Mediterranean Sea was known, and is still known today, as Crete. Because they were surrounded by water, the ancient Greeks on the island of Crete became especially skilled seafarers, a name for people such as fishermen and sailors who earn a living by working at sea. The The high Greek mountains also made a difference in the way ancient Greece was ruled. Because the mountains split Greece into lots of little valleys, it was very difficult to move from place to place. Many Greeks stayed in one place and married people from the same community. Each city in each valley became its own little nation, which we refer to today as a city-state. Each city-state had its own government and its own laws, which controlled the surrounding area. All the ancient Greek city-states shared the same language, although each city-state had different dialects, or a slightly different way of speaking the language. Why did those city-states develop on their own? Yes, because there were many mountains that separated them. Sometimes the Greeks had the same ideas of how to live their lives, but they did those things independently of one another. In fact, the ancient Greeks were highly competitive, and only in an emergency would they work together. After each emergency, each city-state would go back to independently minding its own business. People in each city-state thought themselves less as united Greeks and more as citizens of their particular city-state. The ancient Greeks looked at the world around them very differently from the way other people of their time looked at things. For example, we are going to hear the story of how one city-state decided not to have a king anymore. Not only was this different from what other Greeks were doing, it was completely different from what the Mesopotamians and Egyptians had done before, and from what the Aztec, Inca, and other civilizations would do in the future. We'll hear more about this later. For now, all I will say is that the Greeks had a unique way of seeing and thinking about things. We have a lot of exciting adventures ahead of us as we learn about the unique way the ancient Greeks lived and thought about things, and how their many contributions are part of our lives today. All right, my friends, we've learned a little bit about ancient Greece so far. I'm going to ask you a couple questions about what we talked about. First, what's a civilization? We've been talking about the ancient Greek civilization, but what is a civilization? What does that mean? You've got it. A civilization is a group of people that live together in an organized way. All right, ancient Greek government was organized by city-states, by something they called city-states. What is a city-state? A city-state is an independent city and the surrounding area that that city controlled. All right, what was the land like in ancient Greece? What was the land like? Was it a desert with lots of sand? Was it really snowy? What did it look like? The land in ancient Greece is very rugged and rocky. Because it's so rocky, it's not very fertile and not very good for growing crops. How did that affect the Greeks? That rocky, rough terrain, how did that affect them? Right. Because they couldn't farm like many people did in ancient India and ancient China, they had to learn to live off of the sea. So they had lots of people that would fish and use the seas for trade. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. They would fish and use the seas to trade. They traveled across them. How are the Greeks unique or special? We talked about how they did something that was very unique and hadn't happened yet, and it was very special. What was it that made them so special? Right. Unlike most civilizations at that time, the Greeks did not have a king or emperor or leader of leader over all of Greece, like most places did. Instead, they elected leaders of their city-states. The city-states acted independently, and they didn't have to be ruled by a king over all of Greece. All right, I'm sure you probably still have some questions about everything we read about. We're going to talk more about them throughout the rest of our domain. In our domain, just like we did with ancient India and ancient China, in this domain, I have a civilization chart. This one looks a little bit different than the ones we made for India and China. Our ancient Greek civilization chart has a couple of different things. Our jobs are the same. We'll talk about jobs in ancient Greece. We'll talk about religion in ancient Greece. But instead of cities in ancient Greece, we'll talk about city-states, about those special city-states. We will also talk about leaders. We won't talk about writing in ancient Greece, but we will talk about contributions. Contributions are not a necessary part or component of civilization, but the Greeks contributed a lot of things to the world. So remember, a contribution is something that was started by a civilization long ago that we still use today. And we'll talk about a bunch of different contributions from the ancient Greeks. Today, I want to talk a little bit about jobs. In our read aloud today, we learned about a couple of different jobs that the ancient Greeks had. What were some of those jobs? What were some of the jobs that the ancient Greeks had? What were common jobs for them? You guys are good. One of our jobs, like all civilizations, was farming. But the ancient Greeks, we talked about how they had that rough and rocky terrain, which made it really hard to grow crops. But there is a special kind of tree that grows very well in that rough and rocky terrain that Greece is famous for. Do you remember what kind of tree that is? I've got a picture of it here. It is an olive tree. You guys are right. Olive trees are tough, and they can grow in lots of harsh environments that a lot of other plants cannot flourish in, cannot grow well in. So there were lots of farmers who planted olive trees. I'm going to put this picture of this olive tree under our jobs column. Another job that a lot of people had in ancient Greece was shepherding. Lots of people in ancient Greece had the job of shepherding. That's taking care of animals like these sheep. I'm going to put this one on our jobs column as well. And our last job that we talked about, what was it again? Fishing or seafaring. They would fish and buy and sell the fish, they would fish and sell the fish, and they would go seafaring or exploring, and they would use their ships to travel to other places to trade. This is our last picture that I'll put on our jobs column for today. All right, my friends, I'm going to have you go ahead and open up the PDF that is attached to this assignment. We're going to take some notes about what we learned about today. On that PDF, we'll be writing down some notes or important things that we think we should remember about jobs in ancient Greece. Whew, I got tongue-tied. I'm going to jump over to my computer and I'll show you what that assignment will look like. When you have that PDF opened in Kami, it should look like this. As we go through all of the components of ancient Greek civilization in this domain, we will take notes about what we are learning. We'll take notes about each of the components of ancient Greek civilization. Today, we talked mostly about jobs in ancient Greece. We're going to write down a couple things that we remember about jobs in ancient Greece. You may use your text box and your drawing tool on this both. As we take notes, it might be helpful for you to draw a small picture also to help you remember what we talked about. I'm going to make that smaller. Some of the jobs that we talked about, one of them, we're going to put a number 1. Oh, maybe. There we go. I remember we talked about farming. That was one of the jobs, but this doesn't give me a lot of information about farming. So I'm going to add another sentence to help me remember. I remember that the terrain or the land on Crete, we talked about the island Crete, is rugged and bad for growing crops. Actually, we'll do a full sentence. So, farmers mostly planted olive trees that could grow on the rough land. If you would like, you may draw a picture of an olive tree. You don't have to. The pictures sometimes help. I know for me, drawing pictures helps me remember what I learned. I'm going to draw some olives on my tree. It's not a very good olive tree, but that's okay. It's just there to help me remember. Another job that we talked about was shepherding. Oh, I forgot my number. That's what I forgot. Oh, it might not let me do a different number. That's okay. Shepherding, again, doesn't tell me a lot about what they did. What does shepherding mean? That's kind of a big word. Shepherds take care of sheep. And you might want to draw a sheep underneath. Our last one that we talked about was seafarers. People also had seafaring as a job. I want you to write me a sentence about seafaring and what that means, what that job looked like. And if you would like, draw a picture to help you remember. When you are done with your sentence, when you're done with all of your sentences, and your pictures, if you would like to draw pictures to help you remember, go ahead and turn this one in, and you are done for today.